You're welcome to start with that, or if you want to do a welcome.
Okay, so then welcome back to the lobby. We are going to start with your questions and answers and proposal to these two case studies. So, Angeline said, first of all, thank you, Professor Franco. The company I used to work for went through the same pixel artist problem and has a small supply chain team dedicated to new product development that is part of CSC. So she wants to know how this is connected.
Yes, exactly. So this is something that I have seen also. The fact that because I teach this, last time I taught it in the executive education here at MIT, we had a class of like 100 students, and several of them mentioned this is something that I have seen before.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense because, like we were discussing during the breakout, Eva and I, so big companies or corporations have a majority of their business may be on products or areas that may be similar. However, there's a few, especially related to innovation, that are on new areas and that have new special needs.
Mm-hmm.
So forcing those new areas to do things the way the old areas do it may be dooming them to failure. Imagine that you have an army. Imagine that you have an army of 10,000 soldiers and they're marching to war. You may send a scout group ahead of the army just to look at the terrain and so on. You cannot ask this scout group to behave the way that the 10,000 behave. You want them to be more nimble, faster, more agile. So they have to use a different approach to doing things. Same thing applies here. Remember when we discussed the Fisher matrix, that you have your more functional products or your more innovative products. I have some. I think this matrix may be oversimplifying the problem a little bit, but the central message is that the same strategy doesn't apply to all situations, and that message is true. In the case of pixel artists, the core business, you can think of it as a more functional product in the sense that it's better known. Its demand is more predictable. The needs of the market are better understood. The wearables business unit would be similar in the matrix to what Fisher called the innovative products, where the demand is more uncertain, but not only the demand, also the production process is more uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
There is a cost not in money, but in time, of changing to the preferred suppliers.
Yeah.
And for the wearables business unit, time is more important than money.
Definitely.
Because they don't compete on price. They compete on speed and on access to IP.
You're right. So given that Laminates is a leader in this industry, Roberto, what do you think were the main reasons for failure in this company?
This is a very interesting question because Laminates is they are not rookies. They are one of the 3 biggest companies in the laminates industry. So how come they accept a contract from one of their main customers, a very important customer, and they make this promise and they fail to deliver? It's astonishing. And I think to understand the reason of why this happened, we have to, the immediate reason was the bowed middle problem.
Yeah.
They couldn't figure it out. But yeah.
One minor question: they was the leader in this company
yes, exactly.
doing that. So
yes,
before this,
exactly. So you should be able. It's like having Mariano Rivera and he cannot throw a pitch. It's like what's going on, right? Exactly. So the answer is that they had made this commitment of using large-scale plants, not only large-scale, like the largest plants that they could manufacture.
Yeah.
And this was a strategy that was very successful for a decade, because for a decade the price of oil, the price of petroleum was very high. And the main raw material is oil. So during this decade, when the price of oil was very high, their strategy of using large-scale plants was paying handsomely, because it's like we are beating everybody else because we are exploiting economies of scale. The problem is that when the price of oil starts to go down, the game changes. Customers want innovation, and pixel art Laminates is stuck with these huge plants that, because they are huge, they are very rigid. They are not very flexible. So the game starts to change, and they don't adapt accordingly. And by the way, that is a similarity with the other case study, where you have a pixel artist developing a tried and tested strategy for the core business, but then going into a new area. So the game changes for that new area.
Yeah.
So in the case of Laminates, it is across time that you have to be flexible in your strategy. In the case of pixel artist, it is across business units that you have to be flexible. But the moral of the story is similar. It is that you cannot apply the same supply chain strategy everywhere, every time.
That's the question. Yeah.
But a little deeper reason for the failure of Laminates was that they had this internal conflict in the supply chain strategy between inventory levels, production cost, and service levels, and they had developed a culture of working in silos. So the inventory people were focused on inventory, the production people were focused on production, and they didn't care for the supply chain as a supply chain. They were each looking at their own function. And nobody wanted to take on a project that would require cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah.
And I argue that the deepest reason for the failure of Laminates was a failure in strategy. Their strategy was blind to the problem of innovation. In the terms that we use in the lesson, they had a coverage problem. Innovation was not properly addressed. And also they had a consistency problem because they had an internal civil war between the inventory people, the sales people, and the production people.
This is a great case. I think this brings one of the main problems that, based on my experience, I found in any other industry, that they work as silos instead of in an integrated way. So we received from Igor, group 3, they identify as the main problem here the following thing. They said, to set up pilot line next to the main line using the same equipment and the expertise of the production team of line 1. Also, they identified that avoiding the shutdowns of the main line as much as possible. So this is their recommendation. What do you think about this proposal, Roberto?
So basically what they're saying is, let's make a new production line next to the big one, but without disrupting the big one. So that's the equivalent of, let's make a new pilot that is not as small as the small one. They say production plant. So we'll be creating a new production plant. Well, I don't know if that was an option because I don't know of the exact layout of the plant, but let's assume that it was an option. That would be an interesting option, but remember that you have 9 months to deliver on this contract. So are you going to be able to build this new line and finish in 9 months? It may not work on the time horizon.
If I understood correctly, they said that because they want to avoid the shutdowns on the main line. So this is like the way they propose in order to avoid this.
I think that the time constraint that I gave them of 9 months makes it a risky gamble. There is a possibility they could pull this off, but I understand, if I remember correctly, when they told me about the new plant they had manufactured, which was the largest plant, that building these plants takes years. It is not something that you can do, let's say, over 3 months, and then you use that remaining 6 months to do the production. I don't think that the time would add up. But it's an interesting proposal.
It is.
It's something. Let's see if some group proposes it. I was going to discuss one of the solutions, but let's see if there's a proposal.
Okay. So Roger from room number 1, they said, attempt to delay demand need dates with customer, meanwhile further industrialize in the pilot plant and scale additional small plants if additional demand needs to be met.
Right. This is an interesting proposal. This is something that my students usually propose. The fact that, can we talk to the, number one, we have a pilot plant that can produce some. It can produce some of the white laminates. So I don't think that my customer needs 1,000 rolls of this thing on day one. So how about I talk with them and I tell them, look, I'm facing a technical problem. Let me use my pilot plant to produce some amount of product that I can give you at the beginning, and we can negotiate a little delay. I think that would have been preferable to just because look what happened. What happened was that the time ran out, that 12 months elapsed, and then when VideoFlat comes, they say, okay, so where's my product? It's like, oops, I don't have it. And then VideoFlat has to go find a new provider, and this new provider has to start from scratch, and they deliver. I think they deliver like in 6 months or something. But Laminates could have been able to negotiate with VideoFlat. Look, I have a delay. I want to use my pilot as a production plant just to get some inventory while I work out. So basically, you would be flipping the roles. You would be using the pilot plant as a production plant for a little bit, and use the large plant that is supposed to be for production. You would use it to test out these fixes for this innovation program. There is something in that question that is very interesting. When they say use your technical expertise, yes. And that's a key element here. Laminates was well known across the industry as one of the companies with the best technical knowledge of the product. So they had very capable people. So they had very rigid facilities, but very knowledgeable people. So I'm pretty sure that if they had dedicated the large plant to troubleshooting, they could have fixed this in a short period of time because they have very good people.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's not going to be cheap because the large plant is expensive. But once you make a contract with the customer, if things go wrong, you have to bite the bullet. And you have to say, we're going to take a little loss here, but it's good for the long term.
Great. Okay, so then in room 4, Guillermo said that it seems that the group was split with 2 different ideas, which is great. And this is the main thing to have this discussion. So part of the group, they think that the answer would be to build up inventory to make up for lost time to fix the high volume plant. So and they explain why. The justification is that the time constraint is pressing and we fix the main plant and we will be ready for production run.
Right.
So what do you think about that?
That's one of the main options for the solution. You have to build up inventory so that you can, because when we say let's use the big plant to troubleshoot this issue, we are assuming that the demand is somehow going to be satisfied. And the way to do it is either you produce the same things in other plants around the world, or you build up an inventory so that you are covered during that period. Now, an interesting point about building inventory is that inventory costs money. And that's fine, you can do it because they have money. This is a company that is very profitable.
Yeah.
So, but they were used, it is a publicly traded company, and they are used to paying high dividends to their stakeholders. So what they should have done is tell the stakeholders, we need for this next period, we need to address this issue, and the dividends you get are going to be a little lower, but it's going to be good for the long term. And that reveals a problem that publicly traded companies face when it comes to strategic issues, because Wall Street is very unforgiving, and they usually penalize companies that don't perform well in the short term, even if the reason for that failure in the short term was a long-term benefit. And as a result of this, usually publicly traded companies have an uphill battle when trying to implement strategic initiatives that don't have an immediate payout. Yeah, but definitely that's a solution that I would consider, building up inventory until the fix can be found in the large plant.
Yeah, but in the same room they said, okay, but the majority decided that upgrading the prototyping plant was the better decision because we would be fixing a problem for future contracts, considering both plants would have the same equipment and it would be easier to troubleshoot any future problems that happen in the main plant.
Yeah, I think here we could face, that's the other, by the way, these are the 2 solutions that usually we discuss in class, so a great job to room 4. This solution of upgrading the pilot plant, I think, is the other obvious candidate. And here the challenge is, again, are we going to be able to do it on time? But I think because you're not building a new plant or a whole new line, but instead you're upgrading the existing line so that it can work with a larger laminate, you may be able to put it in that time allotted, especially if you can talk to VideoFlat and tell them, you may have to wait like 3 more months, but I'm going to fix this for you, and maybe I'll cut you some slack in the price at the beginning to compensate for that. But what I like about this solution is that it is addressing the fact that this is the direction where the future is going. So Laminates has to become aware that the market is demanding more innovation, and their pilot plant is no longer able to deliver that level of innovation. Yeah. So they have to upgrade their pilot. So this looks to me like a robust solution, and it's definitely worth considering.
Perfect. So we have Aldegundo from break room number 2. They said, if we were 3 months after Laminates, first take a face-to-face cross-functional team to discuss the actual situation and propose review business strategy if it fits into this new huge SKU.
Yeah.
Then based on capacity and utilization, which facility could be more likely to be the one selected to be the house for produce it and evaluate the
Right.
technology we need.
This is a very important point. He says face-to-face across functions.
Yeah.
The reason I included in the case the existing conflict between inventory, service and production is to illustrate the following point, which is what they're saying. They're saying, breakout rule number 2 is saying, maybe all the functions should sit around the table and talk this out, right? The problem is that they were a strained family. They were what in psychology is called a multi-stress family. So, because the functions are like a family, they are individuals, but they also are part of a larger whole. But if they are not in speaking terms, if they are not using to collaborate, and if they are used to seeking their own good at the expense of the supply chain, how likely do you think they are to sit down and have this conversation about this new issue? They haven't been able to resolve the core issue, much less. So then this begs the question, should they have accepted this contract to begin with? Because another school of thought is that when VideoFlat comes with this proposal, they should have said, hold on, we're not in a position to do this. We're going to pass on this, but let's get the house in order so that the next time we have a proposal, then we can take it. But that's the problem of taking on a new innovation project when you have a burning issue already that has been languishing there. And by the way, I know firsthand that core issue remained in the company for years after we were done with this project.
And the final question for Laminates, Roberto, what would you have done if you were the VP of the supply chain?
I think I would have recommended building up inventory to cover the demand, and also using other plants around the world, because they don't run their plants at capacity. They run the plants like at 80 or 90% capacity. They could use the other plants around the world to compensate for the production during the time that a chosen plant is troubleshooting the issue. So you pick one plant as the most likely candidate to produce the new product. You tell all the other plants to cover that demand, and then you stop that plant until you fix that issue. We have a team of very competent people, and we know that the solution is very close. They just have to bite the bullet and go for it. And this is illustrated by the fact that their competitor figured this out in 6 months. So how come? If these guys, they are not better than you, but they had the willingness to do it. So that's what I would have recommended.
Excellent. So let's move now to the pixel artists, since we are almost 3 minutes almost done. So one of the group, Jorge from group 6, they say there is a communication problem. The main problem here in pixel artists is a communication problem. What do you think about that?
I agree entirely. And that relationship, again, was very contentious. So the complaint was, we don't get a seat at the table. They tell us too late and whatever. But then the wearables people, they would say, the corporate supply chain group, they're just trying to push this thing down my throat. They want me to, this doesn't work for me. They don't understand my needs. I interviewed like 20 to 30 people in these two groups. And it looked like, it reminds me like a an awkward Thanksgiving dinner in a family that has some internal tension. It's like, you don't talk to me, oh, but you don't understand me, oh, but you don't listen to what. This is what I was hearing. And definitely there is a communication problem. But not only a communication problem, I would say there is an understanding problem. Corporate supply doesn't understand the needs of wearables. And they assume that they know those needs. Because they say, oh yeah, they think they're this is actually a quote.
That's the problem.
They said, every little business unit thinks they are unique. Well, in this case, they were unique. But this kind of disregard from the corporate supply group, it's like, oh yeah, you think you're unique, but actually my suppliers can do it. The problem is not that your suppliers can do it. The problem is that they're not going to do it fast enough. So there was a communication problem, but I think that was a symptom of lack of understanding. I would say a lack of a willingness to understand. And here I have to blame a little bit the corporate group. They had been so good for so long for the core business that they became a little arrogant. They became a little cocky. And they thought that they knew best. I already know what you need, so shut up, let me help you. I know what you need. And they were wrong.
This happened many times. So Igor from group 3, I think they propose something interesting. Let's see your opinion about that. They say, okay, let's have the wearable business unit work as independently as necessary to bring the products to the market as soon as possible, and also set up a liaison group within the core unit procurement to draw on the core group's expertise and to realize the economies of scale as quickly as possible once the wearables take off.
I think this is right on the money. This is exactly right. So you have to let the wearables do their thing and become successful, and then help them use the corporate group as a resource to help them. I think this is exactly right. And I cannot comment on how this played out because this project is actually something that is ongoing. We did this project last year, and I don't know what the long-term outcome was, but this is what I would recommend exactly. Let the wearables do their thing, and then help them bridge the gap into the corporate group when they are ready, so in a way that helps wearables. Because we have to remember here that the corporate supply chain group is there to help the business units, not the other way around.
Perfect. So great proposals, MicroMaster student.
Yeah, great job.
Great job. Thanks, Roberto, for this amazing discussion. I think we can be talking about this for hours, but I think it's time to close the Hangout session for today. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy it and see you next week.
When is the next on Hangout?
The next Hangout is going to be October the 6th with Dr. Bruce Arsen. So thanks a lot and see you next week. Bye.